All right, we're going over our food chains and food webs now. All right, so the flow of energy in ecosystems. Remember, organisms need energy for cells to function. If we don't have energy, our cells die. Because of this, the need for energy in our organisms is going to be connected by a feeding relationship. Remember, our plants get energy from the sun. An organism eats those plants to get energy in the form of ATP, and then we either eat the plant or we eat the organism that ate the plant. So energy is being passed down. A quick video for you guys. Please refer to the PowerPoint and click play on that video for me. You have producers, consumers, and decomposers. Producers are an organism that produces its own food. It's also known as an autotroph. Okay? It includes plants, algae, and bacteria. Many make food through the form of photosynthesis. There is like a mild exception of chemosynthesis. So it's going to use light energy to combine carbon dioxide and water to produce glucose and oxygen. This should be completely familiar because we have gone over photosynthesis. Okay, again, we have energy, carbon dioxide, and water coming in, and then we have oxygen released and glucose formed. We inhale the oxygen as heterotrophs, and then from there, we eat the plants to get that glucose energy and convert it to ATP. So, the equation for photosynthesis, in case you forgot, is 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O plus 6 C6H12O6. What is also formed are 6 oxygen molecules, so carbon dioxide plus water plus oxygen. So you have producers, consumers, and decomposers. Consumers are organisms that can't make their own food. They're also known as heterotrophs. Okay, so heterotrophs equals consumers. All animals are consumers. Some are going to eat producers and some are going to eat consumers. If an organism eats the producers, it's an herbivore. If it eats the consumers, it's a carnivore. If it eats both producers and consumers, it's an omnivore. So, consumers can be divided into a different order. So, producers make the food. Our first order consumers feed directly on those producers. Second order consumers feed directly on the first order consumers. Third order consumers feed on the second order consumers. So we go producer, first order, second order, third order. Okay, you can see this in the little pictures down below. However, as much as we have our producers, consumers, and as much as we have our producers and consumers, we also have decomposers. A decomposer is an organism that gets energy by breaking down the remains of dead organisms. So they're pretty much like taking out and recycling the trash. They're another form of a heterotroph because they do not create their own energy. Okay, they're getting energy from dead organisms. Most of them are going to be fungi and bacteria. Some earthworms and insects are also known as decomposers. They're kind of nature's recyclers. They're going to return carbon and nitrogen back to the air and then also a little bit to the soil. So they're really recycling a lot of things while getting energy from that dead organic matter. Here's a really funny little picture for you guys. My little music people should really like this. So for our food chains and food webs, we have to talk about our trophic levels. So a trophic level is going to be the feeding level in an ecosystem. Producers always make up our first levels. Consumers at each level then get energy by feeding on organisms at the lower level. So if we look here, we have our producer at the bottom, then we have our primary consumer, our secondary consumer, our tertiary consumer, and our quaternary consumer. However, as you go to each level, only 10% of energy goes to the level. Now, if you look at it in another form rather than one of these pyramids, you can look at it as a food chain. A food chain is a series of organisms in which each feeds on the next lower level. Now, the arrow between each organisms refers to the flow of energy. So it's the flow of only 10% of energy moving on to the next level. That's why the higher up the predator it is, they have to eat more in order to get the energy because they're only getting 10% of that organism's energy. Here is another little picture. It's going to be one of those energy pyramids. Producer. First order consumer, second order consumer, third order consumer. It's also known as our producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. We can go up to quaternary consumer and beyond, but this is really going to show that flow of where the energy is going. Now, decomposers break down the remains of waste of all organisms in that chain. So ultimately, that energy is going to go back, and we're going to pick up and recycle all of that waste. Now, there is a difference between a food chain and a food web. A food chain shows only one path for the flow of energy, so it's not going to be very complicated. A food web is going to be more complicated because it's going to show the network of interconnected food chains in an ecosystem. As you can see here, instead of it just being like the bunny eats the plant and then the coyote eats the plant, instead we have like a snail eating the plant and the bunny eating the plant. The bird is eating the snail. The bird gets eaten by the hawk or just ultimately dies and gets eaten by worms. This is a food web. It's going to be a lot more complicated. So looking here again, food chain, it's that one little flow of energy versus our food web has all those different arrows showing that flow of energy moving throughout the different organisms. Now, for food webs, the populations of an organism is going to be connected. So a change to one population is going to affect a change to another, right? Let's just say all of a sudden something happened and all the phytoplankton died off. Right? If our phytoplankton died off, this is going to affect other organisms. Let's make it even bigger though. Let's just say all the Arctic cod died off. If the Arctic cod died off, that means we'd have more of these guys here. That means that we're probably going to have an increase in the seal population. However, the seal also eat the Arctic cod, so that means they lost some food, so maybe they have a decrease. We don't have any Arctic cod for these guys to feed on, so they're going to go down. Our seabirds don't have the Arctic cod to feed on, so their population is going to go down. The food web really shows the interconnectedness of species, and this is super important because species rely on each other to survive. So here's another example. If a disease decreases the number of grasshoppers then the number of small birds that feed on the grasshoppers is going to be affected. It would cause a higher level consumer then, like the fox and the hawk, to possibly die off. Okay, so again, if our grasshopper is eaten, our bird population goes down. Let's just say the fox is feeding on those birds. If we don't have enough of these birds, then the fox population will decrease. So not all the energy on one trophic level is transferred to the next level. I said this before, I'm going to say it again. Only about 10% of energy is moved on to the next level. So this right here is an energy pyramid. It's a graphic representation of that flow and transfer of energy. 90% of energy is going to be lost in the form of heat. So if I start with 20,000 kilocalories, to the next level I'll only get 2,000. To the next I'll only get 200. From there I'll get 20 and then to 2 because only 10% is going up to the next level. 90% is lost. So organisms at each level use some of the energy to carry out life's basic processes. They release some into the environment as heat. Some of it's going to be stored in organisms in forms of bones and teeth. Some parts cannot be decomposed or consumed. That being said, only around 10% of energy goes on. 90% is lost. Okay, this picture right here is really just showing a graphic organization of that. Okay, only 10% is going up. A lot of it's getting lost as heat. And that dead organic matter, what's left of it, the decomposer is going to use. But still, a lot of it's going to be lost as heat. In summary, right, we have food chains, we have food webs, and we have energy pyramids. Our food chains are very basic. Food webs are more complicated. And then our energy pyramid is really just showing how energy is taken and lost. a quick video for you guys. Please go to the PowerPoint and press play on this video. If you have questions, please let me know. Please make sure you're referring to that PowerPoint. That way you can make sure you didn't miss anything essential. Thanks, guys. Take care.